Hey, get inspired, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning into another episode of Life Inspired, the show where we talk all about how and why people are following Jesus and typically talk about a turning point. We kind of say life was going along and dot, dot, dot. God stepped in and turned your life to a new direction, and now you're walking an inspired life. And so you can always watch this program on Facebook, on our YouTube channel, or at lifeinspiredshow.com. So that's another way that you can share this story. So after you watch our guest today and you find that, oh, this would be great for so and so, and you want to share it, those are ways that you can share it too. We do ask that you like our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel, because that does help more people hear about how and why they can follow Christ too. So our guest today, I'm super grateful, is Jonathan McKinnies. Thank you so much for being our guest today, Jonathan.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So I have known you for so many years from our co-industries, and I did not know when I first met you that you were a Christ follower and you've done all these other things for Jesus and the community and stuff like that. And I am so delighted. I have no idea what turning point you're going to talk about, but I typically ask three questions. What was life like before whatever turning point you want to talk about? And most people have numerous ones. So if you have two or three, that'd be great. So I don't know if it's life before you had a personal relationship with Christ, or if it's just before he turned you to do some new thing that he's got you working on that's feeling inspired. Tell us a little backstory.
Yeah, so like I said, I appreciate you having me on. I've been serving the Lord in I would say a proactive way since about 2003. I was actually a
Wow.
product of South Bend. I've been in South Bend all my life. My dad is a Marine. They say once a Marine, always a Marine. So he's a Marine.
Oh, I
And
didn't
I
know
was
that.
born in
Cool.
yeah yeah I was born in North Carolina, Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. And when I was still young, we moved back to Indiana, and so I've been pretty much in Indiana all my life. I was never really into church per se, or serving the Lord in any sort of proactive way growing up. I was introduced to the Lord when I was younger. My grandmother went to church, and we had a family that was involved in church, that were kind of branches of my immediate family, but just never really was involved in church until I graduated from high school, as a matter of fact. And so after high school, I was in my first year of college at IUSB, and that's when there was a major change in my life and my family's life. And it really, my testimony connects a lot with my brother and just our family as a whole. We kind of have this sort of interdependent testimony. And it was right after 9/11. My brother, James McKinnies, who's also in our industry, he was in the military, and he received orders, active duty deployment orders during Operation Iraqi Freedom. And he, at a certain point, was saying, "Hey, I need to get my heart right before I go overseas, and I want to make sure that I'm,
Right.
right with the Lord." And so I still had a hunger at that time, and so that was the catalyst at that time that kind of changed our family dynamic. But it
Wow.
started before that. My life was one of good student. I was a good friend. I was a good citizen. Really didn't do any bad things per se. I didn't have this crazy testimony of how I was so far gone. I was actually just I did well as a student athlete, and had friends, but I was always a follower. And so my testimony is that of somebody that was a follower that just wanted to blend in with the crowd, and then God kind of changed my mentality to say, you know what, I'm not calling you to be just a follower of other people. I'm calling you to be a follower of my word. And I know that it started
Wow.
when I was choosing colleges. When I was in high school, I was going to go to Ball State, and I wanted to go there because I wanted to follow the crowd. I wanted to, have fun with my friends. And for whatever reason, I stayed in South Bend, and I enrolled at IUSB so I could work and go into just kind of paying some of my bills during college. And unbeknownst to me, it was right in that first semester of college that God started to really speak to me about really giving myself to Him, my life to Him. And that was right after my brother received his active duty deployment orders. And then I followed him to
Wow.
church just a couple Sundays later. And the Lord started to really deal with me after that point. And then, of course, there were some more that went along with it. But I can pause there if you have anything you wanted to add.
Yeah, so technically, the next question I'd typically say is, so what was the turning point? So it sounds like your turning point is then in 2003 when he kind of tapped on your shoulder and said, "Hey, Jonathan, I don't want you to go to Ball State. I want you to stay here, and I want you to go to this church, and I want you to do that." So tell us what that was like. What's the whole turning point part, and involve Jim and whatever.
Yeah. So, maybe stealing or utilizing my brother's testimony a bit. It was actually a Christmas play that was at our church, our current church now. We go to Christ Temple Apostolic Church in South Bend. And it was a Christmas play that was just, not this professionally produced play or anything like that, just young kids in a play. And it just so happened that was around the time that God started speaking to my brother. And my dad, although my dad wasn't in church or anything, he was connected because our grandmother was. And he said, Jimmy, to my brother, he says, there's a Christmas play. Let's just go there. And so he took my brother to the Christmas play. And I was just working that night. I was just working at a restaurant and I wasn't even there. But man, the Lord started to speak to my brother at this Christmas play, just young kids. When God starts to speak to you, my thought is, and I think many people's testimonies would be, it doesn't have to be a perfect song. It doesn't have to be sung in the right key. It doesn't even have to be some
Right.
great orator that's speaking to you. But when God starts to deal with you, it doesn't matter who's speaking. When the word starts to go forth, it starts to just prompt you and pricks your heart. And that's what happened to my brother. And at that same time, although I wasn't there at that play, God started to just sort of maneuver into my life. And because of that, I attended a normal service. It wasn't like, oh man, all of a sudden I just started serving God. It was actually,
Yeah.
I had some baggage. I had some issues that I had to deal with. I had relationships that weren't healthy. I had issues in my own life. I was still a good guy. I was a good student at IUSB. I was still making money at the restaurant and trying to work my way through college a little bit. But then, just slowly but surely, God just continued to deal with me until I just fully surrendered totally to God. And that's really my testimony is just allowing Him to continue to lead me. And I think often I think people struggle with that. Like they feel like they have to get it all right at once. And that's not what it was in my life. I just slowly kind of continued to keep pushing in until I realized that, I am a disciple. I have been discipled. I am growing in my walk with God, and my maturity level continued to develop. And I had to cut relationships out. I had to get my mind and my motives correct. And so often I think God has to deal with us in many avenues in our life before we can really get to that level that God wants us to be at. And I'm still not there. But because of that,
Absolutely.
though, I stayed. So this is just so powerful because I stayed in South Bend. I was working at a restaurant. My current wife, Sarah, was working at the same restaurant. If I was at Ball State, I wouldn't have been there with her, but she was at that same
Wow.
restaurant. She was waiting tables. I was cooking, and we started connecting, and we started to date a little bit. But what was really interesting is that the same church that we attend, her parents grew up, or her mom and mom's sisters grew up across the street from that church. And so they were connected in that way, but we didn't know that, obviously. And so I connected with my wife. We started dating. She wasn't in church either at the time. She actually invited herself to church. I was kind of that shy. I just started serving God, and I didn't invite her like I should have. But then she invited herself. We started a Bible study, and Sarah, my wife, just really just went all in herself and started serving God as well. Not long after me, really. And then wouldn't be much long after that, we got married. We have 3 kids now. I started in the mortgage business while I was still working at the restaurant, going to school. So everything happened. It just seemed like once I started giving my future and my plans to God, it was like this exponential growth just started happening. Like there was just massive changes, with meeting my wife, eventually getting married. I was started in the mortgage industry and continue to develop in that area. Now I find myself where I'm actually in the ministry now at our church. I'm our discipleship pastor, serving in the capacity of helping in our food pantry outreach and that ministry. We work in a small group capacity. I help with our other discipleship leaders and teachers of our church. And it's just crazy how all of this happened because the Lord kept me in South Bend just years ago when I was choosing colleges. I think it all stemmed from that.
That's so amazing. Do you have a favorite Bible verse? Because while you were talking, a Bible verse passage came to mind of some of the things you were saying, and I wonder if you have a favorite kind of life verse or anything like that.
I think there's so many verses. I would say to people that are just wanting to have an idea of how they can develop a life that's successful from the measurement of what God would say, I would say read Psalm 1. So Psalm 1 is incredibly important scripture. That's very important. I think that's so powerful. But for me, so many. One of the verses that I think is so powerful is when you think of committing your ways to the Lord. So if you would acknowledge God in all your ways, and he will develop your steps, or if you commit your ways to the Lord, then he will continue to develop your walk with him. That's so important. So committing to the Lord. But the one that really sticks out is in Ezekiel. He talks about how it's not by might nor by power, but it's by his spirit. It's by my spirit, saith the Lord. And so from my standpoint, I never want to get in the way of God. I want to make sure that I am humbly submitted to him, realizing that it's never about me. It's never about my talents for my glory. It should always be about his power. It's about giving him honor. And I think sometimes we, even as Christians or as disciples, we can get kind of in our own way and our flesh can rise up. And so for me, I always remember, Jonathan, it's not by your might, it's not by your power, but it's going to be by his spirit as long as you continue to commit your ways to him.
Awesome. That's awesome. Well, and I want to know more, if you could tell us a little more about what Psalm 1 says, but the one that was coming to my mind was, for I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans for good and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. And you'll search for me and find me when you search for me with all your heart. And I was feeling like he's got this great plan for Jonathan. And when Jonathan decided, oh, really? I'm going to go follow God. I mean, I just feel like so many of us push against what we feel like God leading us to do, just like maybe your kids are playing in the backyard and maybe, I don't know, maybe you have a creek behind your house and they're playing in the little creek and you're like, hey kids, come on, we're going to go in the car. And they're like, I don't want to go in the car, Daddy. I'm playing in the creek. I'm having a good time playing in the mud in the creek, whatever. And they don't know that you're about to take them to, I don't know, all the way to North Carolina to the beach, and they're going to see the beach for the first time in their life, and they're, wow, this is so much better than the creek in the backyard, and we just don't understand that what seems really great for us is okay, but he's got so much bigger and so much more. And that's what I was hearing while you were telling your story. It's like, Jonathan, you don't know what I've got for you. I got this great stuff for you, and it's just going to go on from there. I just love your story. Like I said, I've not heard it before, and boy, it sounds like every man's story. Like, this is exactly what Jesus wants. And I love that you said, it's his spirit, because it is. His spirit's the one that talked to you when you went to church. His spirit's the one that talked to your brother when he was at the play with your dad. And his timing's so perfect. I mean, there's a perfect timing, like even the night that this airs on a Monday night, somebody's watching this video that needs to hear your story. So I just thank you for sharing it. That's just amazing.
Yeah, no problem. I would just, remind everybody that it's not, sometimes it's not just a feeling, or that it's not this huge, this huge turning point. I mean, there is a turning point that happens, but I think sometimes people are waiting for this miraculous sign from God somehow, like they fleece God, like Gideon, to that sort of extent, like, Lord, give me a sign, then I'll move forward, or, show me this way,
Right.
then I'll commit my way to you. But sometimes it's just a matter of just a mundane decision. It's, the miracle happens in the mundane moments, when you just are committed,
Amen.
faithfully making a decision that, may not be this great, wow, but it's just, I've made a decision. And as you make those little decisions, you look back and you can see, like, man, I can see God all over this circumstance, this situation. But sometimes we have to slow down and like ask God to open our eyes so we can see where he's brought us from and where we are. And it's easy to say when you're looking back, but I think sometimes there are people, like, maybe there's people watching now that you're going through situations like, man, I don't see God at all. But all I would say is just one decision at a time, one day at a time. Allow God to continue to lead you and guide you. And as he leads you and guides you into all truth, then he'll continue to show himself mighty.
Right.
I think that's important.
Right. And can you tell us a little bit about Psalm 1 to make people want to go check it out themselves?
Absolutely. I can even read a little bit. I brought it up on my phone real quick, and I didn't want to misspeak because there's a couple scriptures I get twisted up. In Psalm 1:1, it says, "Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night. And he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, that bringeth forth his fruit in his season. His leaf also shall not wither, and whatsoever he doeth shall prosper." And so there's the three kind of segments there. So when you look at that first verse, Psalm 1:1, blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly. So how do we walk? Nor standeth in the way of sinners. Where are we standing? And then nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. Where we find ourselves seated. So how is our walk? Where are we positioned? Where are we standing? And are we sitting in the right seat? And so as we continue to seek God, we can ask him to guide those different areas. And that's just very powerful, because you can be planted like a tree by the rivers of water that bring forth fruit, and you have leaf that does not wither.
Wow, that's awesome. I can't thank you enough for sharing, Jonathan. I think this has been super powerful, and I don't want to drag it on because I don't want to make it so long that somebody doesn't want to watch it. I want a nice short clip so that they'll see your whole story. I'm so thrilled that you would share, and I am excited about the miracles in the mundane. That is an amazing quote there. The miracles in the mundane. That's great, and I love Psalm 1. That was awesome. So thank you so much for sharing. I just feel like that whole sitting, don't sit in the seat of the scoffers. We're supposed to sit and read the Bible every day. Just what does God have to tell me? I don't want to listen to I don't want to sit and listen to the news.
Right.
That just causes fear. If you sit and listen to the news, whichever side you're on, you're going to find something scary in the news. And we need to be stopping the social media reading that we're doing, even though this is going out on social media. We need to just sit with God and listen to him. I thank you so much.
Amen.
So
Thank
very
you for
cool.
having
So
me on.
can I assume that you would be happy to have coffee or a Zoom with somebody that has more questions about walking with God?
Absolutely. I'm always open.
I knew you would. Yeah, absolutely. So I want you to ask Jim if he'll tell a story, and Sarah if she'd tell her story. I'd love to have both of them be guests. So
Absolutely.
yeah, and as you guys know that are watching, because of COVID, we're still doing this virtual thing. That's why Jonathan's on the Zoom and I'm here on the red couch kind of by myself. So Jonathan's the virtual red couch. So thank you guys for watching. Jonathan, thank you for sharing. And you guys, please do, if you have questions, messages here, whether you're watching via YouTube, Facebook, or Life Inspired Show, we will hook you up with Jonathan so you can have coffee. And if you know somebody else that needs to tell their story, or if you know somebody that needs to hear this story, please share it. Thank you again, Jonathan. Y'all have a great day and a great week.